If you are Jesus' disciple, you will be hated and persecuted. You will fail in your mission if you don't remember this. And he warns 3 times. In verse 18, he says, you must keep this in mind. In verse 20, he said, I want you to remember what I told you. He says, I've told you this so that when the time comes, you will remember that I warned you. So over and over, he says, I'm warning you. You need to understand this or you're going to fail in your mission. What he's actually saying is, you need to see that you will be hated and persecuted. You also need to understand why you will be hated and persecuted. And you also need to know how you should respond when you're hated and persecuted and why you'll be able to. He doesn't say in verse 20, the world might persecute you, depends on your country and depends on your century. He says they will persecute you. Blessed are you when you are insulted, when you're persecuted, and when people speak all vile manner of things against you for my sake. And 2 Timothy 3:12, Paul says, all who live godly in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. In every time, in every place, categorically, if you're living a consistent Christian life and you're not hiding who you are, you will get contempt, you will get flak, you will get insults, you will get mocked, you will get people who detest you and who disdain you and show you contempt. If that's the case, then let me ask you a question. Is this happening to you? Does it ever happen to you? And if it doesn't happen to you, are you living a consistent Christian life and are you hiding who you are? Number 2, why is it that any Christians, anytime, any place, who are living consistent Christian lives and are just not hiding who they are, will get contempt and get disdain and flak? And the answer is, it's partly because of something in us, Christians, and it's also partly because of something in Jesus that makes the world detest us. So first of all, something in us. In verse 19, he says, it is because you do not belong to the world, that is why the world hates you. Because you don't belong to it. Because I've chosen you out of the world. You don't belong to the world, and that's why it hates you. We people in Western culture like to think, no, we belong to ourselves, but actually you have to live for something. You've got to base your life on something. You have to have something has to give your life meaning, something gives your life purpose, something gives you a decent self-image. It's something you point to and say, because of that, because I'm doing that, I feel good about myself, and whatever that is, you belong to it. It owns you. So you might say, I'm an accomplished academic, or I make good money, or I have a family who loves me. All good things, by the way. But if they're the primary thing that gives you meaning and hope, if that's the primary thing that makes you feel good about yourself, it owns you. You've got to have it. It controls you. But Jesus says, the moment I choose you, the moment you experience my grace, you don't belong to those things. Now, that doesn't mean when you become a Christian, you don't leave your profession, you don't leave your race, you don't leave your family. But those things are no longer your primary identity factors. They're no longer the main thing that gives you the self-image, the main thing on which your identity and self-regard is based on, your purpose and meaning in life. None of those things do you have to have. They're good things, but they're not ultimate things. And so they don't own you. And if they don't own you, you're suspect. See, because the other people in the family, other people in the profession, other people in your race will recognize that the allegiance they have to those things is not there in you. If you're a Christian, the company is not first, the party is not first, the family is not first, even your race is not first. Because it's Jesus' love of you, which is the foundation of your life, and what Jesus thinks of you is the foundation of your life. And that changes everything. When you become a Christian, you change because those things aren't first anymore. You don't belong really to them. That is to say, they don't own you. And everybody else who they do own looks at you and says, wait a minute, you're not one of us, are you? And you're not. You do not belong to the world. I've chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you. But the other reason why the world tends to hate and persecute is not just something changed in us, but also something about Jesus. Because in verse 20, he says, if the world hates you, keep in mind, it's because they hate me. Now, why does the world hate Jesus? It's because deep in every human heart, there is something, some impulse that says, nobody tells me what to do. Anything that triggers our deep desire for self-sovereignty. Anything that punctures the illusion that we are competent to run our own lives because we so deeply desire. Nobody tells me what to do. Anything that comes along and threatens that elicits a response of hostility. What will Jesus Christ do? Who comes and says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. Just go out there and say that. Just tell people about that and people will get angry. The idea that your goodness is not enough, God never owes you. You're going to be saved by grace. You're going to be saved by me, Jesus says, and then you owe me everything. And boy, the human heart absolutely hates that. If Jesus Christ is who he says he is, if he really is the resurrected Son of God, then that we lose control and the human heart hates that. And therefore, there are plenty of people in the world doing everything they possibly can to avoid that conclusion. And he says, if you're connected to me, they'll hate you too. Number 3, what do we do? When this happens, what does Jesus Christ say should be our response? When he says, a servant is not greater than his master. It's a remarkable principle, because what he's saying is, when hatred and persecution comes to you, just remember, a servant is not greater than his master. What does that mean? Well, it means that when you receive opposition, you need to make sure that you're receiving opposition for him, for your master. In other words, if you're being opposed, make sure you're suffering for his sake, not yours. Matthew 5 says, "Blessed are you when you are persecuted for Jesus' sake or for righteousness' sake." It does not say, "Blessed are you when you're persecuted for obnoxiousness' sake." I want you to know that if you're obnoxious, if you're intemperate, if you're abrasive, doesn't matter whether you're a Christian or not, doesn't matter whether you're trying to talk about Jesus or not, if you're abrasive, if you're culturally inappropriate, if you're tactless, if you're haughty, if you're arrogant, and people get mad at you, there is no beatitude for you. If you're being obnoxious, God is not going to bless you in that. He's gone. He's not there. He's watching from a distance and say, well, you're going to get what you deserve. You have to be absolutely sure that you don't just say, oh, I'm suffering for Jesus, when actually you're suffering for your own sake. Which means this: the reality is that it's usually not just for Jesus' sake or for our sake. It's something in the middle. In other words, we're pretty imperfect as followers of Jesus. And we often can get into a situation where we may be taking flak and our Christianity has something to do with it, but it's also true that we didn't do it well either. We didn't conduct it well. We didn't speak well. So here's the point. When somebody criticizes you, and they're partly right and partly wrong, what do we usually do? When someone criticizes you, they're almost always partly right and partly wrong. Even the part that's wrong is maybe exaggeration, maybe a little bit of misinformation. I'm here to tell you that if you want to make sure that you're suffering for Jesus' sake and not for your own sake, that if somebody accuses you and they're 90% wrong and 10% right, go to the 10% and admit it. If they're 90% wrong and 10% right, see that 10% and bring it up and say, well, no, you know what? I shouldn't have done this. And you're right to complain about this. Why, you say? Well, number one, it's the way you grow. It's the way you learn, so that you don't ignore the parts that you have done wrong. Number two, it actually usually lowers the temperature of the conversation, makes it easier to go on. But number three, it's the way to honor Jesus, that you're not hiding behind him when actually you're getting flack that actually he doesn't deserve, only you deserve. And therefore, make sure that if you suffer, you are suffering for him and not for yourself. But also, if you suffer, you need to suffer as he did. See, when he said a servant is not above his master, is a way of saying you need to take hatred and persecution the way I did. What does that mean? It means that when it comes to you, you should take it without enjoying it, without avoiding it, and without being at all surprised by it. When somebody gets after you and starts to criticize you and slander you and come after you and all that, the terrible temptation is you use it to feel noble about yourself. And we happen to live in a society, which is the first society in history, in which the only high moral ground that exists in our society is if you can prove you're part of a persecuted group. So you have to prove that you're a victim, that you are a persecuted group, and then and only then have you got power over the people who oppose you. Then you can vilify them. Then you can castigate them. Then you can denounce them. But you have to prove that you're persecuted. Jesus Christ, however, did not enjoy it. Jesus didn't do that. Why? He prayed for his enemies. He loved his enemies. When he was reviled, he reviled not again. He never said, I'm a victim, and therefore I'm going to be able to castigate those of you who are who are doing this to me. We live in a society in which people enjoy being persecuted because it's the only high moral ground there is. Christians must not go there ever, 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 because Jesus did. When hate and persecution comes, don't enjoy it, number one. Number two, don't avoid it. Don't avoid it. When he was being tried before the Sanhedrin, they said, who are you? And he said, well, I'm the Son of God, and you will see me coming, in clouds with angels. And he knew what would happen if he told the truth. He knew it would kill him, but he told the truth. He didn't seek persecution, but he did not shrink from it. And we should be the same. Let me just ask you a question. Do people know you're a Christian? You realize if Jesus is at the very center of your life, so he matters to your decisions, and he matters to the way in which you handle your problems, and he matters to you emotionally, and he matters to you personally, and the people around you who work with you and know you, do they see that? Do they even have any inkling you're a Christian? I got to say, if Jesus is central to your life and they don't know that, then you are hiding who you are, or he's not central to your life. Don't avoid it. And then lastly, don't be shocked by it. Don't be surprised by it in any way. Jesus Christ helped people, and he witnessed the truth. And some people had their lives changed, and other people crucified him, and same thing will happen. According to the Bible, all human beings are in denial about their need for God. All human beings are in denial about their sinfulness. You try to talk to them about the gospel. You try to help them in the way Jesus helped them. Some of them are going to have their lives transformed, but some of them are going to try to crucify him. And Jesus says, follow me. Okay, how? where are you going to get the power to do this? So how are we going to be able to face it? How do we even deal with the loss of reputation? Our name, our reputation. And if I'm too known as a Christian, I'm going to lose that. I'm going to lose clients. I'm going to lose face. I'm going to lose reputation. But in the Old King James Bible, it says that Jesus Christ, though he was equal with God, made himself of no reputation. Jesus Christ had the ultimate good name and the ultimate reputation, and he made himself of no reputation, and he took all the shame and all the vilification that I deserve so that I can have glory and my name's written in heaven. So that if he was willing to suffer, lose his reputation for me, I can certainly lose a little reputation for him. When I see what he did for me, then I can do this a little bit for him. He came and took shame. He took no reputation. He took the insults, and they fell on him so that we could have the name which is above every name, so our names can be written in heaven. Who cares what the world thinks? Because now you've got your names written in heaven. You've got the reputation that will last forever. You've got his glory because he took your shame. Yeah, you'll be able to handle it when you're hated and persecuted if you see what he did for you.